All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are officially into spooky season, as this is our first episode in October, and we're going to take things on a slightly different route this October. So we're not going to do specifically Halloween movies. We're going to do movies that take place at Halloween. We're going to do movies that encompass the feel of Halloween. And so when you start thinking about Halloween and that fall season, it might arise those feelings of romance in you, depending on where you live. You might start thinking about those fantastic trips you can take with your significant other or with your children. Maybe you make that pumpkin patch trip because that's an October thing. You got to make that pumpkin patch trip. You got to get that candy apple. And what comes out of the pumpkin patch when you're watching horror movies? Nothing other than Pumpkinhead. That's right. We are talking the movie Pumpkinhead, the classic creature feature from 1988, featuring an actor that we all know. And we're going to get to him in a little bit, because if you don't follow us on Instagram, we might teach you a little something about him today. But this movie's got a little bit of everything. It's got old ladies up on the mountain. It's got bumpkins. It's got no traffic light towns. I mean, this damn thing could have taken place in Alabama. In northern Alabama, there are mountains here. Like I have met people like the characters in Pumpkinhead. So Dave, I know we both said when we went into this one, we've seen it before, but it's been a long time. I think we both said easily 20 years. So in a section that we're calling Origins, Dave, does Pumpkinhead hold up?
You know, I remember liking Pumpkinhead when I was younger, and just the name kind of brings about this like Halloween feel. And I remember watching this movie a lot in Halloween time when I was a kid. It was like one of those things that like, it was, the leaves don't start to change colors here in Miami.
Right.
But I would see pictures of leaves changing color. I was like, oh, it's time to watch Pumpkinhead. And so I saw it a lot as a kid, but I had not seen it in years. I think it holds up. And it's kind of weird because there's very little gore. There's very little in the way of like kills. There's a few, but it's not really like the balls to the wall stuff, you know. Right. It's it almost feels like a Tales from the Crypt episode that got stretched out a little bit.
I can see that.
And I think that's okay, because when you watch this movie, when you watch any movie that Stan Winston's name is attached to,
correct,
you're watching it for the creature. You're watching it for the monster effects. And in that respect, this movie really delivers. I think that there's something magical about Pumpkinhead, the monster. I think that, believe it or not, I think there's some really good writing in here. I think that the dialogue is particularly well written.
Agreed.
I think that no character in this entire movie says anything that myself or a friend of mine wouldn't say. And for a low budget 80s monster flick, that's huge. Because I was watching this and I was like, man, you know what? With like the right A-list cast, this could be like a Hereditary. You know, if you would have like a Gabriel Byrne in here, you know, if you would have a Toni Collette in here, what would that do for this movie? And they just, they don't have the budget to pay for this. So you get Lance Henriksen, who I fucking love.
Oh, incredible.
Anytime I see Lance Henriksen in something, I know I'm going to have a good time. And that's what this movie is really, I think, is it's a good time.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I watched this movie for the first time. I want to say it was 2002 because I'm picturing who I
Oh,
watched it
okay.
with and where I was living. And the reason that when I fired this up, we picked this. I was like, yeah, Pumpkinhead. And I fired it up. I was like, yeah, Halloween movie. And I was watching. I was like, shit, that's right. This movie doesn't take place during Halloween.
Mhm.
But the story of why I'd associated it with Halloween, more so than just because his name is Pumpkinhead, is because I was living in an apartment with some buddies and we'd done the Blockbuster trip on a Friday night. It was October. And we were like, yeah, no, let's grab a Halloween movie. So we grab this movie called Pumpkinhead, essentially expecting some sort of killer that has a pumpkin on his head. So we're like, this is
Mhm.
Halloween as fuck. We're thinking killer jack-o'-lantern. That's what we're in for. And once I started watching it and I put all that together, I remembered why this is so just completely tied to Halloween for me. That being said, I agree. I think it holds up. I think that there's definitely that level of 80s cheese when it comes to some of the
Mhm.
cinematography and stuff like that. I mean, it's definitely a product of its time. You can feel the 80s filming techniques just seeping out of the screen.
Yeah.
Watch this. But we did get some good performances. Like I'm with you on the Lance Henriksen thing, man. Like I said, he's just amazing. If you don't follow us on Instagram and you didn't know this tidbit, let me fill you in. Lance Henriksen is one of only 2 actors that have been killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator.
Yeah.
You know the other one, Dave?
Is it shit. Fuck. I'm seeing his face and oh, hang on a second. I gotta look up his name because it's like game over, man.
That's him.
It's
It's
game
Bill
over.
Paxton.
Bill Paxton. Wow,
I
what
was
a brain fart. But I knew who the fuck we were talking
as
about.
soon as you said I could see him, I was like, if he says game over, man, I'm gonna give him credit. Yes,
Okay.
Bill
Yeah.
Paxton is the only other actor that's been killed by all 3 of those. So
Yeah.
just an interesting little tidbit there about Lance Henriksen. But this movie, what's really cool about this is a lot of times in those 80s horror films, especially when you get into that slasher genre, it's all just about the kills, and the
Mhm.
story is nothing more than a plot device at best. I love the reference that you made to Hereditary because there is a lot here that with a bigger budget and a grander view of what horror can be and
Yeah.
is now, then there's a lot that can be done with this because we really do get some really great stuff out of that. So I liked the evolution of that. I liked watching some of the characters grow and change. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff here, but when it ultimately comes down to it, and we're gonna get to talk about them later, man, this is the Pumpkinhead show. They did absolutely right to name this movie just Pumpkinhead
Yeah.
because he is a beast of a movie monster. And just so I think it holds up. I think that there's a lot of fertile ground here for things to talk about. And I really enjoyed it so much. Today I was off sick from work today. So after I got a nap after my doctor's appointment, I went back and rewatched the second half of this movie just to really kind of take in a lot of the little things they did to take away from the fact that obviously 90% of their special effects budget was in creating Pumpkinhead. So
Yeah.
we weren't going to get amazing kills. So I tried to go back and look for the ways that they did cuts or the way that they still made those moments really dramatic without showing us too much of what he did. And credit where credit's due, they pulled that off really well. We've talked plenty about movies that don't give us the money shot and how disappointing it is. What's great about this is as often as we don't get the money shot, they still manage to put something into that moment that makes it still feel weighted and like something you want to watch so you're not upset that you didn't get that moment. And the couple we get are pretty great. So I'm not upset about it.
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with what you qualify as the money shot.
Right.
Because when the money shot is the Terminator punching a hole through your chest, and then you see that gory fist come out the back, Bill
Right.
Paxton, right? Like that's a money shot. But then there's a different money shot, which is like what we see behind us here on the screen, right? There's the creature shot. And
Yeah.
ultimately what this is a creature feature, because I think you can go back to like the Universal monster movies and you can see a lot of this, like with particularly I'm thinking of the creature from the Black Lagoon,
Yes.
where you've got all that great underwater photography going on. Uh Florida boy Riku Browning is the guy who directed all that stuff, who was in the suit and did all this stuff. Like, that's the money shot in that movie. To
Right.
see that choreography between the creature and the girl, like, that is for me like what brings me back to that movie. What brought me back to Pumpkinhead so often as a kid was the monster, the shots of him in the trees holding this girl up
Yes.
before he drops her. It, for me, it wasn't about the drop. For me, it was about that. That shot of this thing. What the fuck is it? You haven't even really fully seen the creature yet. And I think that's something that Stan Winston, who directed this thing, right? It was the very first thing he ever directed. I think that he kind of understood that what he was going to be able to deliver was a badass creature feature and not some gore fest, which I think we don't, as popular as the creature feature is, we don't get it often.
Right.
And that's I think where I want to shift gears. So in a section that we're going to call Pumpkin Lore, talking about the story of Pumpkinhead. So this is based on a poem by a poet named Ed Justin, and it's basically what we see on screen is this poem, and we get bits and pieces of this poem early on when Bunt's family is kind of like just running around and singing the song, and it's pretty simple. Fuck around and find out.
Yeah, that's exactly. There we go. Boil it down.
I think that you can't sublimate this into a simpler thing. You can keep reducing this into some sort of reduction sauce, and what you're going to end up getting is fuck around, find out. That's what this movie's about. Country edition.
Yes.
That's it. And there's something beautiful about that, because it's America as fuck, but it's also Halloween as fuck, because to me, like, it feels Halloween.
It does.
And like you said, this isn't a defined Halloween movie.
Yeah, it could be October. We don't know.
Could be, right? And we're both from the South. It's October. I'm sweating my ass off here.
High was 91 today.
Yes, absolutely. So how does the story work for you? Does it work for you, or is it like it's not about the story, it's all about the monster?
This is one where it's not all about the monster. This is one where we get, so the premise here is that we've got Lance Hendrickson, who's a single father in bumfuck Egypt. Like I said, might as well be Boaz, Alabama. And he runs a little country store, and you can his son is the only thing he has in the world. You get a bunch of teenagers come through acting like jackasses, and one of them runs him over with his dirt bike and kills his son. And so in a moment of intense grief, he finds this old woman in a cabin. They, in the mountains, also kind of on a lake. I'm not here to judge.
Right.
He essentially finds Baba Yaga, and he asks her if she can bring his son back to life. She says, no, beyond my realm of abilities. So he says, well, I know when I was a kid that somebody got killed by a monster because he killed a girl. And she's like, you don't want to do this. Like, fuck you. I want to do that. Right. So he does that. He brings back this demon called Pumpkinhead to seek revenge on these kids. He very quickly realizes that was a terrible idea, not only because he, sicked a demon on a group of teenagers. Gotta love that idea of, 80s teenagers, man, never gets old. And not only is it a bad idea that he did this, but as Pumpkinhead is killing these teenagers, he has to live those moments. Mm-hmm. So now he has to live with his decision, not just with the guilt of it, like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. He has to live with the actual memories of what it was like to murder these kids. So he decides he's going to help them save themselves from Pumpkinhead. And that story, that not even getting into the Pumpkinhead part of that story's so good, because even though we can't all, and I'm knocking out every bit of wood here I can find here, we can't relate to what it's like to lose a child.
Right.
We can all relate to what it's like to make an extraordinarily bad decision at a weak moment in your life. That's something, I mean, and the realm of bad decision is wide, but we can all relate to that idea of, in that moment, nothing else mattered except this one thing, and I made a bad choice. And so in that, even when you're watching him make a deal with this old woman to send a demon after these kids, he's still a relatable character. You're still never viewing Lance as the villain of this movie. Ed Hartley's his name.
No,
You're
never.
I don't think many people would, regardless. But you don't even put the blame on him for what happens to these teenagers. But you still get to see him immediately regret and try to rectify his decision. And I mean, that's the human condition. When it's all said and done, that's what life is. Life is doing something, and if it doesn't work out, being big enough to try to fix it and not just walk away and live with whatever the consequences are. That is the ultimate hierarchy of things that we're supposed to be able to do if we're growing and evolving as a people, is to understand that not every decision we make is a good one, and what can we do to fix it. And like you said, like I said at the top, that idea is really just kind of planted in this movie. And yeah, we watch it grow, and it doesn't have to be ham-fisted, and the movie's only an hour 40 long. They give us just enough of it to walk home with that feeling of this movie that, ultimately ends with a self-sacrifice, because you fuck up that bad, and sometimes there's only one way to fix it.
Right.
And so we get this amazing story that's far deeper than a creature feature in the late 80s had any business fucking around with. And I love that they gave us that, but it wasn't just in your face. I didn't need him to go. I didn't need for Pumpkinhead to take a break from killing while he went to a psychologist and talked this out. And the psychologist was like, well, now you've got to fix your mistakes. No, he was like, oh man, I fucked up. Where's my flamethrower? Boom, bam.
Yeah.
He went out there and he did the damn thing. And that was why I went back and watched the second half of this movie again, essentially from the moment when he started experiencing the kills until it ended again, because I wanted to see how that came across on Ed's face, how he faced each one of those moments and those decisions. And that part of what carried this story ended up, upon another viewing, being far more important to me than the actual monster, even though it was the monster's show.
I agree with everything you said. And there's one thing in particular that that you started to get at that to me is the most interesting aspect of this movie. And it's because I've talked before on the show about how the only thing that truly scares me is grief.
Right.
Losing the people that are closest to me is, to me, the scariest thing that could possibly happen. And that's what this movie is really about, because it is a revenge movie, and I love revenge movies. Like, I love all of the Death Wish movies. Huge fan. And the worse they are, the better they are.
Oh, dude, I will watch Spit on Your Grave tonight and be like, yep, still holds up.
Absolutely. There's something to me about bad guys getting their comeuppance that just hits right,
Right.
But the thing is that it is also a movie about grief because we never meet the wife, and we're
Right.
certain that something has happened to her that was sad.
Right.
And we see in Ed that there's a relationship that he has with his son that he never had with his dad. There's something special there between those two. Um it's beautiful. And when that's gone, the only thing he wants is revenge. So it's revenge by way of grief. It's not just like, as much as I love you mentioned Baba Yaga, right? Like as much as I love the John Wick movies, that's revenge because of an idea.
Right.
It's not revenge because I've lost something. Like a dog.
Past the
And,
first one.
I get the dog thing. If someone fucked up my dog, I'd be fucking up the person too. But your kid's your kid,
Right.
So to me, there's such a real thing there. And Henriksen is an actor that I don't think gets enough credit. To me, he reminds me a lot of Dick Miller or of Harry Dean Stanton, another Alien alum, who like just every time you see this guy, he's given it his all. And the performance is filled with truth. And the performance is filled with a reality that you can get in touch with. And he does such a good job here of selling that grief. To me, that's the most fascinating thing about this story, because how he is linked to Pumpkinhead. How does Pumpkinhead become Pumpkinhead? Is it really the body of the other person? And all that stuff. Like, I get lost in that lore.
Right.
But the thing is, I'm not focusing on that lore because it's not about that. It's about an exploration of what loss does to a person, and subsequently how getting your revenge is not really the way to go about things.
Right.
You gotta deal with that loss, because otherwise you do get lost in the revenge. And we see that where he's like, I wanted these people dead, but now that they're starting to die and I'm seeing this, that's not what I want. What I want is my son back, and that's not going to bring him back. And I think that that's such a simple, beautiful thing that it's almost impossible to fuck that up.
Right.
And it didn't matter how much in this movie didn't make sense, it wouldn't have been fucked up.
Right.
And an important fact, I think there's a lot in this movie that does make sense, despite all the dark magic and the evil hill witches and all that stuff. Like, that's cool, that's great, but like, have you heard of this premise? Because you can't fuck it up.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of evil hill witches, before we move on, I do want to point out something else about the story here that's very important, and that is that there's this idea that this whole idea of like magic and witchcraft and stuff like that is all owned by this this new wave and new age culture. And I know that it's not even new wave or new age anymore because people have been using that phrase for so long. But this movie does an excellent job of pointing out the fact that very few American people do magic better than hillbillies. Look, when it comes to stories of old ladies that are impossibly old and know shit that people shouldn't know and have lived things that people shouldn't live, hillbillies are that dude. Like, if you look at the history of the world and how old different things are, there's a reason that I say you may not do this. When I fall down deep holes of cryptid research and cryptozoology, you constantly end up back in Appalachia, because the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains in the world. And the idea that every hillbilly knows somebody who fucked around with this nonsense and now just lives in a cabin by themselves because they've been exiled or whatever, that is so ingrained in country culture. And like I said, especially when you get into that Appalachia area, there is, I mean, Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, all of these things are in those areas where it's just blue collar mining towns, and there's just these huge areas that nobody goes in. And so I do love that this wasn't that it was something that was uniquely American in being, or not uniquely American, but it was very American in being, an old hill witch. He didn't have to go to, he didn't go to some voodoo priestess or something like that. It stuck very closely with what is American hillbilly lore. And I'm not using that word in a derogatory way. I'm just using it to mean people who live in the mountains, and shoot me if I'm wrong for saying it like that. Right. But I do love that, because so often whenever a witch gets involved, what we get is, somebody who listens to a lot of Stevie Nicks in a big floppy hat. Right. Or
we're not talking about someone who orders her PSLs with extra whipped cream at Starbucks, like I do,
Yeah, this is a lady who sets frogs for traps, and they are simultaneously potion ingredients and dinner. All right. This is a lady who, I mean, in her own words, he says, "God damn you." And she says, "He already has." Like, let's go.
Oh, what a great line.
Oh my God. It was so good. And so that's going to take us right into our next section. So in a section that we're calling Bumpkins, there we go. We're just throwing these words around, right? It's all love. It's all love. In a section we're calling Bumpkins, let's talk about the people in this movie, because essentially we got two categories of folks here. We got the country folks and we got the city kids. They came and they fucked around. The country folks made them find out, right? So who stands out for you in this movie?
Listen, I talked about him already, but Lance Henriksen, I cannot tell you how much I love this guy, whether he's in The Terminator or he's in Aliens. Like, this guy, fucking Bishop is, I can't say he's the best character in the Alien series because Sigourney Weaver exists,
right?
But fuck if he's not the second best character in the Alien series, as a good guy and as a bad guy.
Right.
He's just fantastic. Henriksen is one of these guys, like, he shows up in a movie, I'm going to fuck around with this movie.
Exactly.
And I'm probably going to rewatch this movie. And that's the thing with Henriksen, is I think that he chooses movies that he genuinely wants to watch to be in. And I think that there's guys like that out there where it's like, fuck, I want to have a beer with this guy because all the movies that he's in, I love these movies, like, beyond his performance, because I've seen movies where, like, I don't care for the movie, but that was a good performance, right? This guy, like, every fucking movie he's in, like, I fuck with the movie.
Yeah.
Like, the concept, the premise, it's like, dude, you're fucking cool, because, like, I think I'm a cool dude. Like, I'm a fucking nerd, but I'm also like, who's going to fucking look at himself in the mirror and be like, you suck? No, I'm fucking awesome. And I fucking love these movies. And he's in these movies, So it's like, shit, I want to sit down. I want to have a beer with Lance Henriksen. He's so goddamn cool, And I mean, he's fucking 83 years old, and he's still fucking kicking around.
You got to rent a locker to keep this guy's filmography in. I mean, he has worked constantly. This man has worked since the 70s. I mean, like, looking at his IMDb, his wiki, his first credited thing was 61, but since 72, there are no gaps in this man's resume. He does voices, he does direct to video, he does it all. Apparently, there is a movie coming out called Bring Me the Head of Lance Henriksen, where he plays himself. That's the point he's reached in his career now. It's like, now I get to play a movie about people trying to kill me because I'm Lance Henriksen, or whatever the hell the premise of that is going to be. I'm here for it.
Right.
Sign me up.
So he's just one of these guys where, Lance Henriksen, even if you think you don't, him.
Yes.
And your childhood, if you're anywhere near our age, your childhood was made by Lance Henriksen. And it's great to see him as the star because he's
Right.
always a supporting character, and he does that well. And unfortunately, in Hollywood, if you're a great character actor, like if you're just, and character actor is a nice word of saying you're really you're so fucking good at your job that you can't be typecast, that you have
Right.
to be playing something different because you're that fucking versatile, So like he's this is the first time we get to really see him, I think, at least as far as like my knowledge goes, see him really carry a movie.
Yeah.
And for me, it's fantastic. I felt that way. I mentioned Harry Dean Stanton a little bit ago. I felt that way with Lucky a couple years ago, where I finally got to see him at like the age of 90 or something, like
Right.
star in a movie. It's like, you fucking rock, man. You got Paris, Texas, and you got Lucky. Good for you, man. You'll always be, on the Nostromo getting fucking massacred by the alien for everyone else, but you can star in a movie, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't.
Yeah, I mean, he carries so much weight in this movie and does so much. Like that scene when he first picks up his son and he's walking off with him, and Scratch is like, "Oh, can I do anything to help?" And he doesn't say a fucking word. He just turns and glares at him. And then Scratch later is like, "He looked at me like he wanted to kill me." I'm like, "Well, I saw it, so I didn't need you to tell me that, because I
Right.
got that exact same feeling." But then and then a little bit later, you get him just grief stricken with Haggis, the hill lady, and you get that great moment. Then you get that whole idea, that whole just run he has, where he's desperately, trying to maybe trying to fix what he did, and watching him go through all that, down to at the end, you see the realization in his face when he's like, I have to die. Like, the only way to hurt this thing is to hurt me.
Right.
And there wasn't a minute where I had to be like, wait, what? Because I read it all in his acting. He absolutely slayed. It's amazing to see a movie like this and then go back and realize how many times he was just the other guy, because you watch this movie and go, man, he's fucking great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, he was amazing. The performances of everybody else, they were kind of what they had to be. You get, it wasn't not great, but they weren't bad. We got the performance from the girl who I believe her name was Amber, the one who was just in shock after watching it all happen.
Was it Maggie?
Maggie, that's it.
Yeah,
Maggie.
She does look like an Amber, though.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, I knew exactly who you were talking about.
Right. Yeah, like you get this, you do get a really good kind of just, person in shock performance out of her, which is a weird thing to say, but it never felt forced. So that was good. But man, and I talked about her already, I loved Haggis. She was awesome. And there's some makeup, but it was also like, I'm pretty sure that was an old lady. She was just great in what she did, and the way she delivered lines was so creepy. Mr. Hurley, like, just like that constant, that tone that she had, that set me on edge as much as anything else did. I loved her. And I think that, like I said, I as soon as he saw the cabin, I was like, oh yeah, he went to find Baba Yaga, but that's what she was.
Yeah.
And that was okay. Take away the chicken legs on the house, and she was Baba Yaga. And that's great. That's an area of myth, of folklore that should be explored more, because when you actually dig into the Baba Yaga lore, you find out that like 90% of fairy tales, the evil witch is just a version of Baba Yaga. It was, it was always just that idea that she was this one powerful, omnipresent witch, and she delivered that while not, like I said, her house wasn't on chicken legs. She wasn't wearing a black dress and stirring a cauldron, but I never once doubted that she was a witch.
She just looked dusty and old.
Yeah.
And to your point, she was almost 70 years old when she made this movie.
There we go.
Florence Schaffler, born 1920. This movie was made in 1988, so she would have been 68 years old. And
them years used to be harder. 68-year-olds used to look 68.
yeah, well, them 68.
This woman lived through world wars and the Depression. Like, we're
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This blew my mind. She passed in 2017.
Damn.
Yeah.
Almost 100.
That's insane to me. Yeah, almost 100. 97 years. That's nuts. That's fucking nuts to me.
Well, I'm glad she was around to deliver this role, because as little as she was there, she was great. I will say one more that I think did a great job in making me hate him, and that was John D'Aquino.
I was gonna mention
as
him.
Joel.
Yeah,
dude, I hated him so fucking much. Just every goddamn thing about him was hateable. It was
yeah. But you know what? There's almost a relatable quality to him, because I think we've all at some point in our lives fucked up so bad that we want to run away.
Right.
That we don't want to face the consequences of our actions and say, no, I'm gonna do better next time. And I know me, I don't deserve to pay for this.
Right.
Where I know that I'll go on the straight and narrow, and that things will be better, and I can't change what's already happened, but I can change the future. To me, that's such a real thing. And his performance, and I don't think that John D'Aquino is an A-list actor by any means. But
he's Todd Gack from Seinfeld.
Yeah. You know, I mean, but I've been rewatching Seinfeld for the last, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months.
I like in the past couple months, I just recently finished using it as my background show again.
That's it. That's what it's been for me, is my background show. So over the past 6 months, I've probably rewatched every episode, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times.
Right.
Paying attention maybe 1 or 2 of those times. But like, that's the thing, is like, he always does a really good job of bringing genuine human feeling into what it is that he's doing, you know, whether it's Gak, you know, or Joel, you know, and that's the thing, is like, I've never killed anyone, not on purpose, not by accident, but I have fucked up before, and I've almost been able to convince myself, like, I shouldn't pay for this.
Right.
I shouldn't pay for this thing that I fucked up, because why should I pay for it when it's already happened and I can just move forward and do better in the future? But if we don't pay for the things that we do, then what even are we doing as a society?
Right.
You know, and I think that he does come to realize that at some point in the movie, you know, where like he wants to face Pumpkinhead. And I think he approaches it almost as a hero moment, because his mind is so twisted. You know, he's like, this is my moment to shine. And it is satisfying to me when he dies.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely it is.
Because he brought this upon himself.
Yeah, exactly. And he does kind of have that moment where you wonder if maybe the realization that his actions are causing this to happen to his friends, even though most of them didn't like him, but one of them was his brother, you know, so you know, he has that moment where he does kind of realize that he's the one who brought this on everybody else. And so his refusal to pay for what he's done, now everybody's paying for it. And so, yeah, so maybe he did kind of view it as a hero moment, even though we all sat back and knew that we were about to watch him get his comeuppance and enjoy every second of it.
There's a couple people we didn't talk about, but I think the one character that deserves to be talked about that we did not talk about is Pumpkinhead. So in a section we're calling "Keep Away from Pumpkinhead," which of course in the poem is one of these, you know, pivotal lines. Keep away from Pumpkinhead unless you're tired of living. His enemies are mostly dead. He's mean and unforgiving. So Pumpkinhead, as a monster, as a villain, how does Pumpkinhead work for you?
All right. So first and foremost, the biggest reason that this movie stands up is because Pumpkinhead, the creature, the special effects that were put into, and the character creature design that were put into creating Pumpkinhead were fucking astronomically good.
Yeah.
The way that this thing looks is horrifying.
Mhm.
His crazy little backstory of being buried in this pumpkin patch cemetery in this one grave up on a hill, and you've got to dig him up to summon him is terrifying. The way he moves was not that blocky. Like, yeah, you could tell
Yeah.
it was puppetry, but I would rather watch something that I can just kind of tell is puppetry if you're going to put the blood, sweat, and tears into creating that puppet that they did for this movie. The actual monster of Pumpkinhead is so damn good. Just everything about him. He looked horrifying. He can't, for the longest time we're thinking he can't die. He can't be hurt. That moment that you mentioned at the top when we're discussing what is the money shot, him crouched in that tree and it's like, shit, he's got a tail?
Yeah.
Like, just he was an amalgamation of like a predator and an alien and a demon slash fallen angel. It looked like he had the wings on his back that had been like cut off or ripped off or something like that. He was all of these things that are terrifying on their own, brought together in one grotesque movie monster. And it was awesome. It was incredible. And as the lore of him, kind of slightly developed, I know that this became a whole franchise. I've never read the comic or played the
Right.
video game or watched any past this, but I do know that there is a whole franchise about this. But the little bit of lore that we got, I mean, it was perfect. He was a perfect movie monster. He was ridiculously strong. He was impenetrable, even though, or like he came back to life even when you did damage to him. He was scary to look at. He had a fucking sick sense of humor. Man, when he takes that girl's face and is just like rubbing it on the window before he pushes it through, and she's still alive a little bit in that moment, like, he had a little bit of everything. It was great. Like, this is one this is the type of movie is never gonna get like a big screen release, but this movie makes me want to find somebody with a projector because I want to see him like 8 feet, 10 feet tall and just take it in like that instead of just watching it on my TV, because this is the type of movie monster that was specifically created to be enjoyed on the big screen. He was spectacular.
I agree. To me, this is the reason why you watch this movie. The story's good, the dialogue is good, the acting is good, but this is why. And when you see the name Stan Winston, you know the special effects are going to be good.
And just in case there's anyone listening that's not getting the fact that we keep referencing Stan Winston, this is the guy who has Academy Awards for Aliens, for Terminator, for Jurassic Park, for Edward Scissorhands. Makeup and special effects is what this guy does, and he does it at the absolute highest possible level.
Like, he is the way horror people talk about Tom Savini. Stan Winston is on that level, but at I think, a less genre and more more in a broader sense, because people have seen his work since Terminator. I mean, I think Terminator 1 is that movie that kind of like brought him to the forefront of special effects work in 1984. And so since then, I mean, his school still produces special effects artists that are making movies today.
And
And
I think he won Oscars all the way into the 2000s. I think he won for Jude Law, Haley Joel Osment, AI.
oh, did he?
I think he did this. I think he did the special effects for AI. Yeah. So this is the guy who
Yeah.
also has continued to grow with the industry because, as we all know, AI was all CG.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to your point, yeah, 2002 Oscar nomination, Best Visual Effects for AI. He's got 3 Oscars: Aliens, Terminator 2, and Jurassic Park. And when you stop and think about like the best special effects movies,
Right.
not like best special effect, because there are effects where I'm like, that was fucking killer, and I don't know how they did that. They murdered some guy, or they actually created a zombie, or there's a real monster called a Yautja or something like that. But it's like,
Deep
for
cut.
special effect movie, the whole thing is special effects. Like, Stan Winston's your fucking guy.
Yeah.
And what I think really is fascinating about this is that Dino De Laurentiis, who's like the guy for like 80s action schlock, right? He turns to Stan Winston and he's like, "Hey, there's this script that we've got, and it's based on this poem about a monster made out of a pumpkin." And Stan Winston was like, "Oh yeah?" And he goes, "We want you to do the special effects." And Stan Winston says, "Hold my beer."
Say less. Yeah.
Yeah. And he just fucking goes wild with this thing, right? Because his level of involvement, if you watch any documentaries on Terminator, Alien, and Predator, like, this guy is at the forefront of these movies. Like, he took special effects back to where they were in the 50s and 60s with Ray Harryhausen, where special effects artists weren't just creating the special effects, but they were kind of co-directing
Right.
with the director, and they were really involved in the actual photography of it, because they knew how to make these effects look fantastic. And as the creature feature in the 80s blows up again, after really like a real big lull in the 70s and the 60s, it's like, okay, let me show you how it's done again. Because Cameron came in, he was like, "Yeah, I got this," and James Cameron's the fucking man.
Right.
But there's more than Terminator, and there's more than Aliens when it comes to creature features in the 80s. Like, you've got fucking Pumpkinhead, man. And he just made Pumpkinhead one of the most memorable horror villains, I think, memorable horror monsters. Is it on the level of your Frankensteins and your Draculas? No. Nothing will ever be on that level, though. But when you start looking at like just beneath that, to me, Pumpkinhead is one of those creatures where, like, the movie could have been shit, because the movie's not shit.
Right.
The movie could have been shit, and it still would have been memorable because of Pumpkinhead. It's kind of like Leprechaun. Like, Leprechaun's not a good movie.
Right.
We talked about this. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. But Leprechaun's not a good movie. Why do we remember Leprechaun ultimately? It's Warwick Davis.
Yeah.
It's the Leprechaun. This movie is better than that. This movie is really good. And yet you still have this monster that comes in and is like, nah, fuck you. You're going to remember because of me. Not because of the good dialogue. You're not going to remember because of the Hill Witches and all that stuff. Rah, rah, go America. I've got a pet bald eagle in my backyard. His name's Jeff Bob. Don't you fucking worry. But my name's Pumpkinhead. And you're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, he encompassed so many things that you find terrifying, right? His body is emaciated and just kind of gross looking, but then he has this crazy strength. Like I said, all these different pieces of him that are kind of put together don't look like they fit, and that what makes him, uniquely Pumpkinhead. And like I think that one of the biggest things for me, like I said, was that idea that there are these stumps coming out of his back that to me gave the appearance of some sort of fallen angel, because they did constantly refer to him as a demon.
Yeah.
And
The demon of
so,
vengeance.
yes, the demon of vengeance. And so those bones that were just kind of sticking out, it's like, this motherfucker used to have wings. Like, this guy he is that biblical tale of turning against the higher power and being mutated beyond recognition and a life of never finding anything. He becomes all of those things. But at the same time, I love that when presented with something that classically should have stopped a demon, he was like, oh, what is this? The hull of a church? Don't give a shit. Pumpkinhead. And he just like walks it. But then on top of just walking into it, because hallowed ground means dick all to Pumpkinhead, he's like, oh, what's that? A cross? Don't care. Breaks it. Like, it was just, they took that moment in the movie to establish, like, yeah, he's a lot more than just a demon. Like, he's a whole ass thing now.
Right.
And I do love the idea that Pumpkinhead, the entity, he digs him up. So we're just like, oh, every time somebody summoned Pumpkinhead, they dug up the same person. But at the end of the movie, what we get is Haggis burying Ed Harley. Mm-hmm. And now, ultimately, yes, killing him stopped Pumpkinhead in that moment. But now his body is the vessel. Now he is Pumpkinhead. And so you also get this really cool, like, last minute bit of lore about how even if you manage to beat Pumpkinhead and you sacrifice yourself to end him, you just ended that one run. Like, Pumpkinhead's not going anywhere. Pumpkin is beyond time. Pumpkinhead Pumpkinhead is an idea. So it's that thing that always gets explored when, like, every horror movie franchise that has a main killer always reaches that one movie where they're like, what if Freddy was just an ideal and anybody could be Freddy? Like, they always, all horror movie franchises reach that point. And a lot of times it doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, no, not anybody can be Michael Myers. It's his goddamn name. He's one person and he is Michael Myers. But you have no idea how Corey much Feldman, you can't be Jason. Go fuck yourself.
Oh my God. What if it weren't for the nudity, and I don't care how this fucking sounds, if it weren't for the nudity, part 5 would be fucking lost.
Oh my God, it's so
bad. It's just fucking terrible. You have no idea how much that quote unquote fan theory of James Bond, like, oh well, yeah, James Bond's just an identity. Fuck you. Who the fuck gave you permission to be so fucking stupid?
Right. Jeez. Like, yeah. So they change actors. It's always the same doctor. We've just been through, 18 people who have played him. It's the same guy, and that's okay. And so Pumpkinhead subverts that, where it's like, no, Pumpkinhead is an idea. He is a demon. He just literally needs a vessel. He's still going to look like Pumpkinhead when he comes. It's just your body was burnt up in here. So now we're going to bury it in the pumpkin patch. Yeah. So I love that they give us just enough Pumpkinhead lore throughout this for it to make sense. There are so many times when you start to get so just deep into the lore of something, even in the first movie, but especially when the franchises keep going, looking at you, Curse of Mike Myers, that it all stops making sense and you stop caring about it all. They gave us that in this movie. They gave us just enough of it where it's like, maybe I do kind of want to watch Pumpkinhead 2 now and see where this goes. Like, it's interesting that there's a video game that came out with Pumpkinhead in it. You start to realize that they did just enough lore building, which is something that really doesn't exist anymore because the current environment is, well, what type of cinematic universe are you creating? What seeds are you planting for the next movie or for the spin-off movie? We've done Conjuring movies on here and talk. We did The Nun. Those all felt natural. I'll give them credit for that, with the exception of La Llorona. Like, all of those spin-offs kind of felt natural and felt like they fit into that universe. They didn't feel forced. And I'm interested in watching Pumpkinhead sequels now because I can see where it makes sense that there would be another one.
Listen, man, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. And I think there's only one thing left to do here, and that's to rate this movie. And we have talked about how this movie is not a perfect movie. We've talked about how much we like this movie, but it's time to commit.
Okay.
And if you are a first time listener, this might be weird. This might be new to you. We never rate movies with stars because stars tell us that everything is equal
Or at least
and
comparable.
and I think all things should be compared only against themselves. You know, why compare Pumpkinhead against Stan Winston's other works? Why compare Pumpkinhead against anything for that matter? Because if we're going to compare it to everything, compare it to the fucking birdcage. How can you do that? You
Exactly.
can't.
That's why we can't do stars, because one,
Yeah.
so few movies in this world stack up to the birdcage, but
Yeah.
two, we shouldn't be putting things on scales that are so different.
Never. You never should. So we only rate things against themselves. Each movie gets a unique rating system. And Daniel, I think out of all the ones that you've come up with lately, I don't want to say all time because I love to commit to like these grandiose ideas like this is the greatest of all time. And then I end up kicking myself in the ass because I think about it, I'm like, oh fuck, it wasn't because this was the greatest. So lately, I think this might be the best one you've come up with. Out of a total possible 5 kids named Bunt, how many kids named Bunt do you give Pumpkinhead?
All right, so we don't math on this show often, but let's do a little math as we figure out our rating here. So one,
I already don't like this.
right? There's at least one boy named Bunt in this movie, right? So
there you go.
At the absolute lowest, it's going to go 1. But then we start adding on some more boys named Bunt because Pumpkinhead is a seriously underrated and spectacular movie monster. After watching this again and having it fresh in my memory, like I feel like I want to get into arguments with people about where he falls in the pantheon of movie monsters. Right? He seems to have fallen victim to one, just kind of time and place. Late 80s, it was a glut of some of these things, and it was easy to lose some of the good ones and some of the bad ones. So, but I think that for all the reasons that we discussed, that Pumpkinhead is an incredible movie monster. So you got a couple more boys named Bunt there. And then I think that the performance of Lance Henriksen in this movie is phenomenal. I think that every bit of emotion, we get to see him as the hardworking country boy telling stories about, his grandma and her hands that feel like tissue paper. We get to see him as the loving father who takes the time to cook his boy breakfast. And apparently story time at breakfast is a pretty regular thing because, his son says, "Is it story time?" He says, "I reckon so." So, you got
I
this
would have
guy.
enjoyed that as a kid.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got this guy who is a single father, runs a grocery store, still has enough time to apparently make his boy breakfast and make up stories every day. You get the grieving father who is just wrecked and makes a terrible decision. You get the guy who grows and realizes the things he did were bad and how he's going to fix them. And ultimately you get the hero who realizes that sacrificing himself is the only way that's going to fix what he fucked up.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different things there worthy of boys named Bunt that I'm not going to ride that 5 line because it's not a perfect movie, right? I mean, it's 80s through and through. It's got that feel to it, but I would feel bad if I went any less than 4 boys named Bunt because I think that you could show this movie to any horror fan who's never seen it and they would be upset that it took them 25 years to get around to seeing it. And because I do think that there is just so much here to learn from and so many ideas here that go explored just enough that I think it's got to sit at a solid 4. Boys named Bunt.
I'm right there with you. And the weird thing is, this is exactly what I was thinking when the movie was over. Because this is one of those movies that I guess it's always existed for me. I was born in 87.
Oh,
This
fuck,
comes out.
35 years. This thing's 35 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. The 80s were so long ago.
Fuck, man. You know, I was talking about something with someone the other day where I was, it was a student, and it wasn't the other day. It was fucking today. And memory's shot. I was talking about the fall of the Soviet Union. We're doing rhetorical analyses in my class right now, and he's going to compare different speeches given by world leaders during the Cold War. And I was talking about, because 20 years ago, the fall of the Soviet Union, he was like, sir, 1991, man. I'm like, uh-huh.
Yeah, the 90s, 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, a friend of mine posted a picture of her son. It's a lot of the schools. I mean, I guess it's homecoming season in high schools, and so a lot of the schools around here do like a week of dress up days before the homecoming game.
Yeah.
A friend of mine posted a picture of her son, and she was like, "It's Decades Day. My son wanted to dress like he's from the '90s. FYI, the '90s weren't 20 years ago." And I just replied, "Flagging for hate speech."
Yeah, my students ask me all the time. My school has this huge network of alumni where it's like everyone keeps coming back to the school. They send their sons back to the school, and they ask me what it was like to be in the school in the early 2000s. Because I was there from 01 to 05, and the first thing I do is I tell them to fuck off. and then I tell them what it was like. I was like, it was this magical time of frosted tips and visors and puka shells.
Boy bands ruled the world and walked around like dinosaurs.
Yeah. We've lost our entire audience. All of the 18-year-olds who are watching this, like, man, this Pumpkinhead sounds pretty cool. They're like, fuck these old men. What the hell? Listen, man, the movie's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it is, I think, anything less than 4 is criminal. Agreed. And to me, the movie feels decidedly 80s, but uniquely timeless. There's something about it that I feel like specifically because it feels like it's Appalachia. Like right. you can go to wherever this takes place in, because they never really say, right? It could be somewhere in Georgia. It could be who the fuck knows where. Right. And I've been to the fucking like Ozarks, like the Ozarks fucking wild.
Yes.
I never want to get lost there because I'll never fucking find my way out. Right. So.
And probably end up dead in a mine shaft. Like, if we're just being honest, I don't know shit about walking around the woods. Yeah.
Yeah. Before nightfall. And I would probably just like find the biggest stick I could find and do it myself. Because whatever's going to find me, it's going to be worse. It still fucking looks that way today.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that we love to do is we'll go into like that northern Georgia, Tennessee border area, and we vacation there during Christmas time. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. Oh, yeah. Fucking looks exactly the same as that. And the cars are exactly the same. And the people dress exactly like time stands still for mountain folk.
Yes.
It's just they are. That's it. There's no predicate there. They are. That's it. and it's this movie captures that. This movie captures that timeless Americana, that cryptid thing where like people in fucking Europe are not worried about cryptids.
Right.
Like they've got their own fucking problems to deal with.
They got one plesiosaur in a lake.
That's it. That's all they've got. And they have fucking picnics on its back.
Yeah. Exactly. We have 4 different types of Bigfoots just in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting. It is big foots and not big feet.
Yes, it is Bigfoot. It's not big feet.
So yeah, anything less than 4, it's would be just absurd. It wouldn't make any sense. So there you have it. It is 4 boys named Bunt, and I'm very happy with that.
I am too. Like if you're listening and you've not watched this one, we told you the major plot points, but you've got to go enjoy this, because this, like I said, this is one you've got to see. You've got to just experience what Pumpkinhead is, because he's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So next week we will be continuing our Halloween extravaganza. We haven't really decided what we're calling
Nah,
it,
we
right?
have like
Halloween Hoedown. Can we
There
do
we go.
Halloween Hoedown?
Mark it, trademarked. We're done.
There we go. Yes, don't bother. We have already trademarked it. So we haven't. Just putting that out there. We have not actually done that.
Oh wait, what? I just got a cease and desist email.
Sent to us by the American Hose Association.
Good people.
The
Good people up there at the AHA.
The AHA. They're fantastic. And a little too much wine today.
I'm on cough syrup and Truly. We're doing all right.
What are we doing next week?
So for the next couple weeks, actually, what we're gonna do is, so last year everything we did, like I said, was straight up these movies take place around Halloween. This year we're doing stuff that encompasses the feel of Halloween. So what we're gonna do for the next 2 weeks is we're gonna hit you with two ends of the spectrum, old and newer, on some anthology movies. And next week we're going to come at you for one that you have heard us mention, if you've been listening at least as long as I've been on this show, no less than 14 times. We're doing Creep Show. We're going back. We're going back to the 80s, the early 80s. We're going back to when you could do scary, you could do funny, you could do it all, and you could do it in one movie, because it's
with
just
Leslie Nielsen.
Correct. The untouchable Leslie Nielsen. I mean, this if you've never even heard of Creep Show, here's how extreme this movie goes. There's a short in this based on a Stephen King story, and Leslie Nielsen's in the movie. Like
Yeah.
Are there further ends of the spectrum than Stephen King and Leslie Nielsen? No. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure there's not. So yeah, so we're doing Creep Show 1982 next week. Very excited about that. So make sure you check us out there. Head to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social medias. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, most active on Instagram. If you are listening and you're following us, check back, because I posted one that I thought would get more traffic that it is not. And I posted one up, and I want to know what some people's horror movie hot takes are. When I posted it, I made sure to point out the fact that we are in the grand minority in the fact that we did not like Barbarian very much.
It can go fuck itself.
It absolutely can. And we got a handful on that one, including Spider Franklin on Instagram, who said the first Terrifier wasn't that good. And I just replied, oof, because I can see where that one's going to bring some heat. So go back and find that one and let us know what your horror hot takes are. We love the interaction on Instagram. And if you want to meet us in person, head to the Hyatt Regency in Orlando for Spooky Empire the 27th, 28th, and 29th, because we will be there. We will be drinking bourbon. We'll be looking for autographs. And I just ordered 200 stickers today. So come get a sticker and a hug and meet us.
Yeah, and maybe not in that order. You might not ask for the sticker and just come for the hug, but you're going to get a sticker slapped on your back.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, very excited about that. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.